Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'm going to do a dark video that follows Jonas Kahnwald's path through time in seasons 1 and 2. I started this months ago after season 2 came out when I was making dark videos, and while I was going through my last rewatch to make my season 2 recap, I filled in all the gaps to finish it up. Since we'll be starting at the beginning of when we first meet Jonas up until the season 2 finale, this video will be filled with spoilers if you aren't caught up with the entire dark series. The earliest point we observe in Jonas's life is in 2019, on the day before his father, Michael Kahnwald, commits suicide, June 20th. We see him wake up at home and head to the lake to hang out with his friends. There we see him find the St. Christopher pendant in the sand at the beach as he sits with Marta Nielsen, who is not his girlfriend, but they definitely are interested in each other. Later that night at a party at the Nielsen's house, these two will have sex for the first time, even though he awkwardly leaves here telling her that he has to go help his grandmother set up her tablet. After his father commits suicide, Jonas goes away for 2 months getting psychiatric treatment, which we don't see at all on screen. His friend Bartosz covers for him, telling the other students that he was away in France. When he gets back, we learn that he takes antidepressants, works with Peter Doppler for support, and is somewhat haunted by his father's memory. While he's away, Marta gets into a relationship with that friend Bartosz, which creates some additional awkwardness for him when he returns to school. On the night of November 4th, Jonas and his friends head to the caves, where Mikkel Nielsen gets separated from the others and disappears from the 2019 timeline. After that, Jonas finds a map of the caves in his father's painting studio. He visits the caves later, but doesn't find anything on his own. He visits his father's grave outside the church, where he's approached by his older self. Jonas has no idea that he is talking to himself at this point in the story, though. Later at home, he finds a box containing that futuristic hand lamp we see him using all the time, a Geiger counter, and his father's suicide letter. He looks at that map he found again and notices that now it's been edited with instructions to follow the signal. When he goes back to the caves, he finds a metal ring and a red string, and he's able to put things together enough to navigate his way to the metal Sic Mundus door. He opens it and passes through, using the passage to time travel to 1986. When he arrives there, he meets a younger version of his mother right away, riding around with his paternal grandfather. He searches for Mikkel, intending to bring him back. He meets a younger Regina and has an interaction with older Egon Tiedemann. At the hospital, he sees Mikkel talking to a younger version of his grandmother. He ends up getting talked out of bringing Mikkel back by his older self, who arrives to tell him that if he does that, he'll be erasing his own existence. At that point, that's enough for him, and he returns to 2019 through the caves. There he talks to his mother, asking her if she believes in fate, and then he burns the version of the suicide letter that came in the box. He tries to reject Martha, who he finds waiting for him outside his house. Now he knows that she's his aunt, but he's in this position where he can't actually tell her the truth. She kisses him, which has an effect, but he ends up leaving her in the rain saying he's sorry. He visits his grandmother and he gets the letter from his father, which is surprising to him at the time because he just burned a copy of that a few days before. He rages on her a bit for letting things happen the way they did before he leaves. He gets into a fight with Bartosz outside the school, and then he heads home. He looks around his father's painting studio, and when Hannah asks him what's going on, he says everything will be all right. After that, he travels back to 1986, and this is the point where he becomes a missing person in the 2019 timeline. He tries to go visit Mikkel at the hospital in order to bring him back, but he's abducted by Noah and Helga that are waiting there. They lock him in the bunker, and then the stranger comes to visit him, revealing that he is his older self and that he's experienced this same conversation before, only on the other side of the door. After that, a wormhole opens in the bunker. He reaches in and touches hands with young Helga and travels to 2052. When he arrives there, he's knocked out by a person we learn later as Celia, who is an associate of older Elizabeth. Months later, we see him listening to tapes that Claudia made, trying to figure out how to travel back to 2020 to stop the apocalypse. He's collecting materials and he finds the time machine, but he needs fuel to make it work. After he gets that, he gets caught entering the dead zone and is almost hanged by Elizabeth, who at the last minute decides to imprison him instead. This is where he gets the next scar that he has for the rest of the series. Celia frees him because she wants to know what older Elizabeth Elizabeth is hiding. They go back to the power plant where he's able to use the fuel to stabilize the God particle, and he leaves 2053. He ends up in 1921 where he meets a young Noah and sees Agnes as an even younger child. He goes to the cave to try to leave this time period, but learns the passage hasn't been completed yet. Then he's taken to meet Adam, who reveals himself to be the oldest version of Jonas that we see. His older self tells him he can change things if he stops his father from committing suicide. He shows him his God particle machine, which is under the church, and sends him back to 2019 on the day before his father commits suicide. So back in 2019, his timelines overlap. He's spotted by the Nielsen's on his way to the lake, and Mikkel delivers the ultimate fist bump line again to him. At the beach, he steps in and impersonates himself to tell Martha that they're perfect for each other and kiss her when his other self leaves. This is funny because I mentioned earlier that they have sex for the first time that night. In that situation, he thinks that she made the first move at the party. Because of this, we find out it was him that set it in motion, but it's comical how it all plays out, and so both characters think the other made the first move. He goes to meet with Michael to try to stop him from committing suicide, only to learn that he wasn't considering it. Michael also tells him that it was him who led him into the caves the night he traveled to 1986. Older Claudia arrives to make sure Michael takes his life, and tells Jonas she's seen the world without him and it's not what he thinks. At this point, he starts to listen to Claudia instead of Adam because he lied to him essentially. Jonas travels back after leaving him there, and at this point we have a gap in the timeline. We know he spends a year with Claudia, but we don't know any of the details about where they were or when they were. But we do see when he comes back that his hair is longer and the scar on his neck is healed. The next time we see him, he's arriving at middle Claudia's apartment right after she let her father die. He tells her that things don't have to go that way the next time and tells her that they need to go. He takes her to the caves and tells her that the big things and small things don't follow the same rules. He says they can change the grand scheme of things, but the details, saying, "We change a grain of sand and with that the whole world." He collects some cesium and he activates the time machine in the passage, reopening it, telling Claudia he is connecting the past to the future. After that, he takes her to 2020. He tells her to go find her daughter and take Regina to the bunker so that they can survive the apocalypse. He then goes back to his home where he's reunited with Marta briefly. Adam arrives and he watches her die after he shoots her, and then he stays with her after Adam leaves. An alternate version of Marta arrives from a different world using a different time machine we haven't seen yet, and she transports him away as the apocalypse is unfolding. This is the end of the season and the last time we see the younger Jonas. We won't be able to find out where they went until we get to see season 3. One of the biggest mysteries related to Jonas's journey through time is how he becomes the stranger, and then how later the stranger becomes Adam. For what it's worth, I am in the camp of fans that believe Adam is Jonas, and not one of the other characters. I arrived there by playing out the other options to their conclusions, and for me, even though it would be a twist if he turned out to be Bartosz or Michael, I don't think it would improve the story. I think learning how he evolved into Adam makes for a more interesting story, and that's all I really need to say about it in this video. We don't know much about where he was before he returns to Winden as the stranger in season 1. I think it's a good guess that he spends some time in Alt Marta's world since he leaves with her, but there's still a lot of unaccounted time. When he does return, he rents a room at Regina's hotel where he hangs things all over the walls. He eventually leaves saying he wants her to hold the room for him and asks her to send the box containing the letter and the lamp to his younger self. He never returns, so she collects the materials and ends up turning them over to Charlotte and Clausen when they come to visit her. After that, we see him go to the graveyard and meet his younger self, which we saw the other way around, and he goes and edits the map in Jonas's room. He collects some cesium and then travels back to 1986 to stop his younger self from trying to bring Mikkel back from the hospital. After that, he visits Tannhaus to talk about time, and he gives him the broken time machine to get it fixed. He returns later to collect it, with Tannhaus telling him that it's the same device in a different condition. He says it's like seeing the beginning and the end of something at the same time. He then has the conversation with his younger self in the bunker before going to the caves to attempt to destroy the portal. He then travels to 2020 and returns to his childhood home where he interrupts a possible suicide attempt by his mother mother, though he doesn't see her with a gun pointed at her throat. He explains who he is, and he proves it to her by showing a scar on his arm that he got as a child and talking about a burn mark on the floor by the stove. He takes his mother back to 1987 so she can see Mikkel living with her future mother-in-law. When they return, they fill Charlotte in on what's going on and later bring Katerina in as well. At one point, he sneaks into Marta's room and places the St. Christopher medallion on her pillow. After that, his mother steals the time machine from his room while he's asleep, and she travels in search of Ulrich. Stranger Jonas is reunited with Martha briefly when she comes to the house. He tells her who he is and they talk, but they get interrupted when Katerina arrives. Later, he'll force her into the bunker at gunpoint, trying to save her from her fate, but she winds up escaping when Peter and Elizabeth arrive. Back at the house, younger Noah arrives and gives him a letter that he says was written by Marta. We don't see what it says, but after he reads it, he leaves with the time machine that Katerina had left there earlier when she learned that the portal in the caves had reopened. He goes and he finds Magnus, Bartosz, and Franziska at the Nielsen's house and travels with them, narrowly escaping the apocalypse. We don't see where they go, but can guess they eventually wind up in 1921, which is where we meet Adam, and we see a confirmed older Magnus there as well. Most of what we see in Adam's timeline takes place inside the church. We know that he had younger Noah kill who I presume is an older Bartosz, and that he and older Noah are trying to find the missing pages from the Triquetra notebook. He has older Noah kill older Claudia and retrieve those pages, and that leads to Noah learning that Charlotte is his daughter that he's been searching for. Adam meets with his younger self, Jonas, telling him who he is and somewhat vaguely what he's trying to do. He says they're waging a war against time, and he recruits his younger self to travel back to 2019, telling him he can fix everything if he stops his father from committing suicide. Of course, he is actually sending him to set things in motion for the suicide to happen, but he chooses not to tell him the truth. Because Noah has realized Adam knew about Charlotte the whole time and kept that from him, he tries to kill Adam, but it doesn't work out. When he fails, Adam has Noah's own sister Agnes kill him instead. Then Adam travels through the God particle machine at the church to the day of the apocalypse, June 27th, 2020. This is where he kills Marta in front of his younger self, saying that Jonas has to experience that pain in order to become him. He walks out of the house, and that is the last time we see him. I assume he returns to the church and travels back to 1921, but we'll have to wait until season 3 comes out to know for sure. And that wraps up Jonas Kahnwald's journey through time in Dark Seasons 1 and 2. I expect that we'll be getting an announcement about Season 3 and a trailer anytime now, and I couldn't be more excited. I'm going to end this video here, but I will be back with more Dark videos while we wait for Season 3 to come out. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you're a fan of this show. If you have any questions about Seasons 1 or 2, leave them in the comments. Let me know your theories about what's going to happen in Season 3, and thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.